Welcome, everyone, to another exciting podcast of Made in Bartlett, a program dedicated to the primary industries of Bartlett. We're joined today by Mark Yoshida and Brandon Seavers, co-founders of Memphis Record Pressing. And I know you're going to find this podcast very exciting. I've been waiting to do this for quite some time. But welcome, gentlemen. Appreciate y'all coming. I think most of our viewers have heard of Memphis Record Pressing. For those who have not, it is one of the nation's largest manufacturers of vinyl records. And you heard me correctly. It's vinyl records. In case you haven't heard, they're back in style, and they've hit the market in a big way. And so Memphis Record Pressing, which is based in Bartlett, these two guys right here started this company. They have a long history together. They didn't start out making vinyl records. They started out making other things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think our viewers are going to be interested in knowing what is going on with the vinyl record market, why it's here, why it's come back. I mean, we thought it faded into history 20 years ago or more. But here it is, alive and well and kicking. So, and I'm going to let you guys just, tag team it however y'all want to do it. But Brandon, you're closer to some of this stuff. So I'm gonna point at you and let you get started on this. But so why is vinyl records back in style? Why are people buying vinyl records? I mean, I stream my stuff mostly, and my turntable, I can't find it. So tell everybody what's going on here.
Well, we've got to rectify that, John. We got to get you a turntable. Well, I mean, there's really two things that are primarily driving the resurgence of the industry. It's many people think that it's nostalgia that's driving this industry. Maybe early on, but now that's not, from our perspective and our vantage point, that's not what's driving this industry. The two things are the collectability of it and the experience. And so collectability is what you see here on the table in front of us, what you see all throughout our culture now, all throughout marketing and media. The vinyl record is prominent. It's in the background of pharmaceutical ads. It's in the foreground of restaurant ads for the newest Applebee's burger. It's everywhere. It's all throughout, it's ubiquitous in our culture. And you see it as a backdrop, instead of bricks behind us, we're going to have vinyl records on the wall. So it's that collectability side. When music started to shrink in the 80s and the 90s, and then sort of evaporated into the ether when it went to the cloud, the things that you wanted to, the tactile experience of music really started to evaporate. And we have to consider that we have multiple generations of people now that for them the vinyl record is a brand new technological innovation. So other than just how did music get onto that piece of plastic, they're like, oh wow, look at this booklet, look at this poster that I can fold out, that I can pin up on my wall. So it's that collectability side. I mean, think about what we wear and what we're passionate about, what we want to display. I mean, you go out throughout this place or your home or any business and things are on display. I mean, what we're passionate about, we want to present to people. So, I mean, unless you're a refrigerator salesman, you probably don't wear a t-shirt that says Whirlpool on it, right? But if you do wear a t-shirt that represents your favorite artist or your favorite brand, and that's really a part of what's driving this industry, is that people want to proudly represent what identifies them. It's that collectible side. But other than that, back to what I said earlier about, this being really a new technological innovation for several generations of people, they're realizing that music was really designed, and the album format was designed to be experienced in full. And so we're coming out, 20 years now into this, what I call the button masher generation, just wanting to get to the latest single, because that's really the way iTunes was developed, and the way all of streaming is developed is for people that are searching out that latest hit, that latest single. But an album is something that's carefully crafted by the artist. I mean, they really think about what's the sequence of the songs, what song should go first, what song should be in the middle, what should be last, what should be on the flip side, when it's an album on the B side, but there's a story there that they're telling, and the artist is telling a story. You can't tell that story in its entirety in just one single. Even someone like Taylor Swift, who's really been a vital part of the resurgence of vinyl. You know, she's been a huge champion for the format. You know, she tells stories, but not only in a song. Her stories are throughout the entirety of the record, and so there's an experience level there that people are rediscovering. That we have multiple generations of people are rediscovering this experience to listen to the record as the artist originally intended for that to happen. Can you do that in a streaming environment? Absolutely, but a record, the experience of putting a record on a player takes undistracted attention. You have to get it out of the jacket. You have to pull it out of the jacket. You got to pull it out of the sleeve. You have to cue it up on your turntable. You actually have to drop the needle. You have to take the time to experience that. And so it's something that's brand new for people. And I think that for us, it's for us who remember vinyl, we're like, well, yeah, we used to do that. We had listening parties, and now we're hearing about that from we have from multiple generations of people. Again, we have an artist that's coming in soon that is going to make a record of songs that she wrote and recorded all on her own, and she just turned 14. So 14 years old, and she and her friends collect records, and they have listening parties.
So that's really an important part of it, because the sharing of the music. For the longest time, especially when it came to streaming, people are listening to their earbuds. It's all personal. Now vinyl is bringing it back to a group shared experience, because back in the day, those of us that are old enough, we didn't have anything other than records. So, in your group, whoever could afford the record that everybody was into, we'd buy it, we'd sit in a group, and we'd discuss it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we want to pull it out of the jacket, right? And we want to, this one has a poster with it. So, we get to the tactile experience of opening this up, right? Hey, look, it's Linus and Lucy opening this up. But this is a collectible item. This is something that was released limited edition one time with a new poster, but then a limited edition that has an exclusive special color for this year only. And then not only that, then actually dropping on the turntable, and like Mark said, having that experience together in community. It can sound a bit esoteric, but it really is what we're seeing from our side. I mean, look, we're the manufacturers, so we're just making this, but we see what the trends are. We see what we press regularly and what we press year after year after year, like this one, Charlie Brown Christmas, which is something that's kind of a seminal recording that is important to so many people. And we have new generations of people that are discovering that.
And why do people collect things, in general? Because a lot of times they're proud of what they have. They like to show it off to their friends. Yeah. In the digital world, you have, even when you used to download music, are you proud that, hey, I've got 200 downloads? It was not something that you could really show your friends. And
I know a few people that bragged about that, but it was, anyway. But I grew up in the 70s, so that was something that I definitely participated in, and it was sort of a ritual or an esoteric thing. I mean, getting the albums out and going through the whole motion and, putting it on the turntable. It was an experience. I've never heard I've never heard anyone really talk that way, but it's true. It is an experience, and I guess the younger generation is finding this out.
Like Brandon was talking earlier, the backdrop, people are putting shelves together where, the whole wall of records.
Yeah.
That was... if you walked into a living room, before vinyl started coming back, it started becoming more bare. You had flat screen TVs that were just mounted on the wall, so the big stereo furniture was gone. Everything was bare minimum. And now people are putting shelves again and putting records, and it's filling up their rooms.
I've got some JBL speakers that are at least 40 years old that are still playing.
All right.
Yeah.
You need to hook a turntable up to those.
Yeah, I know. I got to find my turntable. But I'm a little bit older and a little bit lazier. I just set it on, Spotify and let them play soft jazz, and then, I just,
That's all right. You're not our customer, John.
Well, that's another thing. A lot of people ask us, well, especially, I would say if you're 45 or older, it's a 50-50 chance that you realize how big vinyl is. It's the young generation that's brought it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's not nostalgia that's driving this industry. It's a newfound object. And we have to think, we exist in a rental economy. You rent your music, you rent your home, you rent your car. If you don't even rent your car, you just call Uber and they'll take you somewhere. But music is something that people are extremely passionate about. And I mean, people stand in line sometimes overnight. I think the only other thing they do that for is maybe the new iPhone. But they're standing in line overnight, or camping out to get tickets to their latest concert. They're passionate about that. And so driving from this rental economy, they're like, I want something tangible. I want to not only show support for this artist that I care so much about, but I want something tangible that I can present and display to people to show how much I care about that.
And it's not just the old records, the old music. It's newer stuff
it's everything,
too, right?
old and new. And records are not convenient. Definitely, it's not convenient. So it's not going to take over the digital media,
right?
Because most people are going to continue to listen to streams, but again, it's the experience that you get out of it.
I mean, essentially anything that is released from a major artist, what we consider our frontline artists now, even all the way down to individual artists, if it's released in digital, it's probably going to have a vinyl record that follows up on that release.
Yeah.
I mean, we produce all of your classics, anything you can imagine, from the Beatles to Fleetwood Mac to Elvis. I mean, we're probably pressing those LPs, but any frontline, any new artist that you can think of is probably producing vinyl as well.
A lot of times what they're doing, they're offering limited editions. If you want to show some of those, it could be the same release, but maybe there might be a target release on a certain color vinyl. Maybe Walmart will work out a deal with the labels where they have another release. So you might have 7, 8 different looking records on the same title, same artist.
Now, that is something I didn't experience, is colored albums.
That's the newer thing. Okay. Now, they had them back then, but it was very basic, just like solid colors, or it could be translucent, but basic colors, and it wasn't a lot of them.
Yeah,
because the Beatles had the White Album on white vinyl, but that was a rarity. Now it's become like the norm, and not only do you have color, we do different blends of colors, splatter effect. Everybody wants something unique.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the industry overall. I mean, y'all got into the business, and I want to jump into that a little bit later, but the industry overall, y'all are not the only vinyl manufacturer in the country. There are others as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So is it a very competitive market, how? Now, y'all y'all are manufacturing these for people like Sony and Columbia. Are they even still around?
They are. They're part of Sony.
Yeah. Okay. So how does this business work?
Well, but before COVID, we can kind of go back and talk a little more about the origin of the company later. But when we started the record pressing side of the company in 2014, there were about a dozen plants in the U.S. because the industry had really gone dormant up until so it didn't die, it just went dormant. It really kind of thrived in Europe. It really went underground and dormant in the U.S. But in around 2008, the industry started to revive. And so there was a drive, because it was kind of chugging along underground with audiophile jazz, classical, and punk rock was really what was keeping, and DJs, guys that were actually, and girls that were spinning the records at parties and in clubs. And so that was keeping the industry moving, underground. But in 2008, a group of people got together and they started this thing called Record Store Day. And so Record Store Day was a once-a-year event that was designed on the Saturday of Easter weekend that would celebrate and recognize independent record store owners around the world that were selling vinyl records. And so it was people who love the format, mainly musicians and some guys from some bands from long ago, said, we want to celebrate this format that we love so much. And all of these record stores that are still carrying those. And they started Record Store Day, and the popularity just started to grow because every year on Record Store Day, you would go into a record store and you would be able to buy releases that were limited to that day only. Sometimes that store only, but they were pressed and issued for release only on Record Store Day. And so it really started driving a lot of attention because bands caught on and artists caught on, and they were able to produce content that you couldn't get anywhere else. You couldn't get it on iTunes, which had just come out in 2008. You couldn't stream it on Napster because it wasn't available online. So we're like, if you want this music, you have to go to a record store. Can't buy it on Amazon. To go into a physical record store and buy it. And so from there in 2008, the industry really started to revive. And so 2014 comes along, and there was still very limited capacity in the U.S., so things started to change. So much has changed since then. COVID comes along. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But now there are probably about 50 plants
50
in the U.S.
About 25 of those, or half of them, really are upstarts within the last year.
Yeah, with those year to year and a half, 18 months. There were about 35 plants globally pre-COVID. Now there are about 200. So there's competition in the industry, but there's not a lot of competition on the scale that we're at now.
Yeah.
So at the scale we're at, in the U.S., there are maybe 2 or 3 facilities that can compete with us just because of the scope of what we can produce and what we can do.
So your clients are named brands, I guess, labels.
Primarily, we really started with the assistance of a few of the major record labels, and your major record labels being the ones that most people are going to know: the Sony Music, the Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group, and then there's a fourth, Concord Music Group, that kind of encompasses the rest. And so we really started as a major label pressing house because in 2014, because of the growth after Record Store Day in 2008, there was a tremendous amount of demand for vinyl, all under the radar of the media, but there was a very limited amount of capacity. So the major record labels approached us, along with one of our partners in the manufacturing world from CDs, a company named Fat Possum Records out of Oxford, and they said, hey, we want to partner with you to build a pressing plant. And so that really set the stage for us to be a company that pressed mainly for major record labels. So that's really what has driven us to this point. Maybe 20-25% of our order book also encompasses everybody else, being mid-sized record labels, independent record labels, small record labels, just down to the independent artist. If you wanted to make a record singing, not 100% sure you want to do that. But if you did,
Trust me, I do not.
There's a microphone right here.
If we wanted to record an album today of you singing, we could press that. So we can press it for independents as well. But it allowed us to grow and sustain that growth because we were growing substantially, but with a small customer base. So it allowed us to sustain the front end management of that, as we grew by keeping that.
Our previous company making CDs, we focused more on the independent artists, independent label, and we didn't want to leave that behind. So that's why, like Brandon's talking about, now we're able to set aside a certain percentage of our capacity and cater to the independent.
Well,
That's great.
we were independent artists,
I was going to bring that up. Y'all had a studio, right? Recording studio.
I started in '89 and through '97.
Oh, wow, you're old.
So, did you record your own stuff, or?
No, I recorded other bands, produced and engineered bands, and then Brandon and I met and started working together in '93, and Brandon was a professional musician touring around the southeast up the coast also. And so
Brandon, you were a band guy?
I was. In another life.
Yeah.
What's your genre?
Everything. Everything. I play keys, but at that point in time.
Oh, really?
At that point in time, I was playing in a disco band.
Disco band.
Back in the '90s, disco had
everything goes in 20-year cycles,
BG's
right?
kind of guy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
yeah, okay.
So our background really, I was a musician, but I was too chicken to try to honestly, I like going home and sleeping in my bed. So I didn't want to be on tour.
Yeah, it's a tough life. I know that.
But on the production side, being a musician, being on the producing and engineering, working with bands, we started a label early on. Only had about 7 artists on the label, but that gave us an experience on how we needed to deal with, if we wanted to manufacture, at that time it was CDs, how we go about it, what kind of service we were getting from those manufacturing companies. We both learned from that, and so we knew how we wanted to treat our customers as we got into manufacturing.
Well, I remember, because I was there at y'all's groundbreaking for your first facility in Bartlett, when Audiographics was your first company, right?
Yeah.
And you made the CDs there. Evidently, you had done pretty well up to that point that you could afford to build your own building. Now, that's when you guys came into my life. That's when I first met y'all. But so you built this facility in Bartlett, Audiographics. You were pressing CDs. I guess the business was going pretty well. And then CDs kind of took a little dive. And then you got into the DVD business, or you went from there to vinyls, or how?
We were doing a little bit of DVDs, but on the music side, we thought DVDs were really going to be picking up on the corporate side, a lot of data on there. But because of, just data transfers through the internet, that kind of made that go away very quickly. So the DVD side really was kind of short-lived for us.
Okay, so Sony approaches y'all and says, "Hey, do y'all think y'all could press some vinyl for us?" And y'all's response was,
"Sure."
Sure. As if you knew what you were getting into, right?
Well, I mean, if you want to go back and kind of look at the full trajectory of the story, like Mark just mentioned, we met in the early '90s at what was then Memphis State University, and before it was rebranded to the University of Memphis, and we kind of came up doing being involved in all aspects of the industry. The recording studio, we went through the same program at Memphis State for what was called recording technology, just to learn how to engineer and work in the studio. And so, I went to work with Mark in his studio, and so we saw every aspect from the engineering side to the production side, and then we started the record label, so the manufacturing side, but that involves understanding what distribution is, understanding how manufacturing works. And so we'd really learned all of these different things. I was a performing musician, but also was the band manager. So, we formed a company, an LLC. I think it was right when LLCs come along. We had to, file tax returns.
He was the band's art director too.
The band's art director. I drove the van, so, and I think that's when Mark brought to me the idea of starting Audiographic Masterworks. It was like, we're already doing all these things. We're doing them on the entertainment side, on the band side, and the studio side, and we've seen what it takes to make a CD. Well, let's just we'll step in and do this.
Let's make ourselves. The physical.
So when we started, just the two of us, we were brokering. We didn't make anything. We were in a 3-story building on Summer Avenue in a tiny little office, and we brokered everything. Somebody else made the stuff for us. Mark focused on the audio, I focused on the art and the graphic design. And then we grew into another facility on Summer Avenue. Short stint at Cooper Young. We realized Cooper Young and manufacturing weren't designed to go together.
Having a semi-truck in the middle of Cooper while we're trying to unload boxes was not fun.
Didn't work so well. So, so we really cut our teeth in what it took to operate in, not manufacturing, because we didn't have manufacturing that time, but we did take over the packaging. So once the discs were made and the print was produced, we were putting it together, because we learned that we could bring things in from out of state much cheaper when they weren't assembled, and then we could assemble them in-house and have much more control over the turnaround time. But as Mark said, the thing that we focused on from day one was over-serving the customer, because there's value in customer service that you can't put a number on. And so, we knew that that's what we wanted to do. What brought us to Bartlett was, we got to, 2008, around that period, 2007, and we really had outgrown, and we wanted to manufacture. We wanted to bring the whole thing in-house. We wanted to actually manufacture the disc, much like we're manufacturing records now. We wanted to, it's injection molding. We wanted to make the disc. And at that time, you could get equipment on the cheap, and so we found some equipment, and then we were looking for a space. And so we ran into a really cool guy named Sam Ware that came along and said, hey, I've got properties, but I can help you build a property.
Yeah, we were looking at leasing because we thought there's no way we can afford to build. And Sam Ware was the one that said, after he showed us some of his property and nothing he had really suited us, he learned about what we were doing. He turned to us and said, why are you guys trying to lease? You should buy. And we said, we can't afford it. He said, did you go to a bank? That's a good idea. And so that's where it started, and we ended up.
I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing we did, but that's really what led us to Bartlett, because Sam had connections with Mr. Johnson that owned the property there in the corporate park in Bartlett, and and that's where the journey started in 2007 to find that spot, to figure out what we could build and what was going to house what we needed. We already had the equipment; it was sitting in storage.
Plus, we wanted. I mean, that was a major investment for Brandon and myself.
Oh yeah.
So we could have gone to close to the airport and get a warehouse for cheap, but this was an investment, real estate investment. We were looking for a place that the property would not decline. That was our future, is what we were looking at. So Bartlett was a big part of our. Just that surrounding.
Well, we had a family of people that were working with us too, that we really considered family, and we wanted to take care of them. So we wanted to build a spot that was going to be safe and secure for them, a place they'd be proud to go. So, it's being landed on that spot in Bartlett was really, was fortuitous. The timing wasn't, because 2008 wasn't a great time to start anything.
Well, it was when we broke ground. It was when the market crashed. Leading up to that, we thought everything was great.
Yeah. And we had seen, like Mark had mentioned earlier, we'd spent a lot of time really trying to diversify our portfolio of our order book, because when we started, we were all music. It was essentially 100% music. And so over the years, we met the guys over at V2, and we met some other folks that were doing more corporate stuff. DVD was big. And so we kind of started branching out into the corporate world. And by the time we got to 2008, we were probably close to 50-50 in, invested with audio and corporate work. And then 2008 comes along, real estate bubble burst, and that corporate work dried up overnight. And so really we were left to, okay, what do we do? So we doubled down on the music industry. And, we had a partner that we had really grown up with, a manufacturing partner or a customer, Fat Possum Records out of Oxford, Mississippi. And those guys we really grew up with. They started in early 90s. We started in 97. They came to us for some audio mastering services, what Mark provided. And then we started making a few discs for them here and there. And then eventually we were their sole manufacturing partner. And they really exploded to being more than just a Delta Blues label out of Oxford, to being this indie powerhouse that we're well known around the world.
Are they still around?
And so they are. They're still doing very well and strong. And those are the guys that, fast forward from 2008 to the late 2013. Those are the guys that approached us about building a vinyl plant.
Really?
Because they had seen the surge in the industry. I had actually seen it because I was performing art direction services for those guys. So I was actually designing record jackets for them. We were just making their discs, but I was designing more and more and more record jackets and record packages for them. And they came to us in late 2013. And I remember very well because it was the week my son was born. So it all kind of, as they do, it all kind of coalesced into one point. But they came to me and said, hey, have you guys ever thought about opening a vinyl plant? Because you are good at what you do. You know manufacturing, you know how to get it out the door, you know how to produce quality product. Have you ever thought about it? I was like, well, no. That sounds like a terrible idea.
Well, what it came down to was Brandon and I were discussing, like, what are we going to do? CDs are dying. We thought if CDs ever disappeared, we just jump on whatever the next thing is. But the next thing was a non-tangible product.
Wasn't a thing.
Yeah. So as a manufacturer, how do you compete against a non-tangible
Exactly.
thing? So we realized, well, the only thing left out there that's tangible is vinyl.
And we didn't really know much about at least I didn't personally know much about the resurgence. I mean, we were head down in how do we get the CD company and keep it thriving. So when we started looking, we were like, oh, this is actually something that's happening. In our fat possum buddies, they were like, hey, we're importing, millions of dollars a year of vinyl in from Europe because we just can't get it made in the U.S. because this industry is growing and there's just not enough infrastructure in the U.S. to support it. So that really is what started us on the journey of looking to see what was possible. And here's what we found. Nothing was possible. Because in 2014, if you wanted to get into vinyl record manufacturing, there was no new equipment. There was no new supply chain. There was no new anything. If you wanted to get into it, you had to go search the world for dusty, old, antique equipment.
Broken equipment.
And find somebody to help you put that stuff back together.
Yeah,
Well, I've heard this story. I want y'all to talk about that real quickly.
Yeah, the manufacturers, before I go on where we found it, the manufacturers that made those machines were long gone. So it's not like you could go to somebody and say, hey, I need spare parts, or how does this work? You had to figure it out.
I mean, we got on the internet, literally, and we're just Googling vinyl record manufacturers closed. And we found a place that had, their website was live, but they weren't taking orders. And so I sent them an email, or Mark did. I can't really remember.
You sent me
and then Mark, the guys called like 5 minutes after we sent the email.
I sent an email. I get a reply. I think it was, 10, 15 minutes later. And it said, hi, I still have the equipment. Here's my number. Call me.
I mean,
That's
like
what
that,
I got, and
like
that's
that.
the equipment we ended up with. And it was out of, you could call it luck or persistence of us trying to find something, but that's how it happened.
And the thing is that finding equipment, we ended up finding an entire plant. So this plant, EKS in Brooklyn, they had shut their doors primarily because they lost their lease, didn't have a place. The story there is a little bit fuzzy, but finding an entire plant of all of the materials together was more than a needle in a haystack. And so we found that. Then it was, okay, well, we don't really know anything about this. And so how would we even put this stuff together? We don't know how to run a vinyl pressing machine. We don't know how to make a record. We know how to make a CD. And while they're similar, they're very far apart from being the same. And so, we called around. I don't even remember how we found Donnie's name.
It was, that's a good question.
Was it?
Wow.
Well,
I think it was just talking to different people in the industry because there were such few manufacturers across the country and everybody knew everybody. And it was...
the industry then was extremely small. Like I said before, there were about a dozen plants in the U.S. at this time. So... And of those, there were maybe 3 or 4 that were more than 10 people in operation. So there were a handful that had been around since vinyl's heyday. And so I think we just started randomly calling those facilities and said, hey, we're looking to start a vinyl plant. And most of them were like, thank you.
Yeah.
they were like, please start a vinyl plant.
Open arms saying, welcome to the
because
family.
they were under, the turnaround time to get a record made in 2014 was 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
So think about that. That's the life cycle of an artist 3 or 4 times over sometimes, right?
Really?
So 12 days, you couldn't get, and if you weren't a major record label, you weren't getting your record made at all.
The customers were mad at the manufacturers because their hands are tied. They can only make so many records so quick, but the demand was way up here and supply was way
Yes,
down
I think
here.
that really opened the arms of most of the people we talked to because they're like, we need help. We need somebody. But they were like, who's crazy enough to try to do this? Because there were a handful of people in the U.S. that had started up around that time. Gotta Groove Records in Cleveland and a few other startups throughout. There were a few others that rolled the dice that kind of saw what was coming and had started. But we were like, we don't know how to do this. We're thinking about this equipment, but we don't know anything about it. We don't know if it's any good, if it's, if they're all lemons. So, help us find somebody. So they directed us to a guy in Nashville, a guy named Donnie, that back in the 70s, he worked for one of the manufacturers of
He was an engineer
Yeah.
for the manufacturer that made the presses.
So we because this plant that we were looking at, they had 2 brands of machines, and one of them, SMT, Southern Machine and Tool, was manufactured in Nashville back in the day, and he worked for that company. And so we reached out to him.
Yeah, and now that company folded around 1980.
Did it?
And so when we found him, he was a salesman for a rubber and gasket company. I mean, he got out of the the music industry back.
But he remembered how to manufacture.
He was doing a little bit of consulting here and there,
Yeah.
but we found out he still had all the plans, the diagrams of the original presses, and those were the type of presses that we found from New York, that plant that put everything in the warehouse. So we hired Donnie. Brandon and I, we drove to Nashville just to talk to Donnie. And we said, hey, would you be interested in us just paying you for a few days to go up and take a look at this equipment? Because we didn't know what we were looking at. So Donnie and I went up. We went into this huge warehouse. It was just full of all kinds of stuff. And in the corner was all the stuff, the presses, an old boiler, just a whole bunch of stuff. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, that looks like just junk. And Donnie he spent a few hours looking through things. And he said, they're not in great shape, but we can make these work. So that's where it all started. We said,
Well,
okay.
that's a fascinating, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but let's move forward. Let's jump into today. You've got how many? And these are brand new presses, right? That you've got
Today, yes.
So
is,
when we started in 2014, we started with 6. So we had 6. We had more than that, but we were able to assemble 6 presses out of that. 6 presses, 8 hours a day. By the end of 2015, we were at 24 hours a day because
with 9 presses.
Yeah, 9 presses. We brought a few others online, but we realized these machines are old, they're slow, the process is slow. And here's the thing about the process: it hasn't changed ever, really, since the late 40s, early 50s. The process of making a record has not changed.
Even with the modern
So
day.
even with
presses.
modern machines, our original machines were 100% mechanical. They were analog machines, mechanical, big dials for timers and thermostats. And now the machines that we have are PLC computer controlled. But from them, we started with 6, 9 machines at the end of 2015. The COVID boom, everything changes. People go home, they make sourdough recipes, they cook a bunch, they get a Peloton, and they apparently listen to vinyl records.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, the demand in the industry grew incredibly, and we ended up with another supply chain problem like we had in 2014, where our turn time grew from 6 weeks to 9 months. And so we were under tremendous pressure, again, to do something about it. And so we agreed with our customers we would expand. So we went on an expansion project in 2021, 2022. We built a new production facility in Bartlett. We opened up a new packaging facility right across the street, Highway 64 in Memphis. And we expanded our press count from 9 to now it's 54. And
54 machines?
54 machines. So, we have the capacity. Full perspective, in the first year of manufacturing, 2015, we made 880,000 records. We pressed and sold 880,000 LPs in 2015. In August of last year, we pressed and sold 1.7 million.
In one month.
In one
the
month.
month of August.
in 1 month.
Right. So we more than twice as many as we pressed, or just about twice as many as we pressed and sold in 2015. So we have a capacity now to press and sell about 30 million records a year.
And you were saying earlier before we started the podcast that y'all were fully integrated, or are you creating?
So we finished our expansion in 2022, and what we've been working on since then is automating different pieces of that process, but also what are the remaining verticals. And so last year, along with our group, which we didn't talk about that, but in 2016, we partnered with a company out of the Czech Republic, GZ Media, largest vinyl pressing company in the world. They approached us they were importing records into the U.S., but they were looking for a manufacturing footprint in the U.S., and so we agreed to partner with them because we're like, who better to partner with if we're really going to seize the day and we're going to take advantage of this. So they're the ones that started manufacturing machinery. In 2018, that's when we started replacing our antique vintage machines. 4 years ago in September, we replaced the last of our legacy presses. We kept one for posterity's sake.
and so you see what the difference is now. The modern presses, again, the way that it presses a record is the same, but you have it's PLC controlled, so it's computer controlled. You have more robust moving components. In a 24-hour period, the older presses, if it's running pretty well, maybe 1,700 records in a 24-hour period.
That's on a good day.
On a good day. And the newer presses, you're averaging probably 25 to 2,600 records in a 24-hour period. So
Almost double.
it actually, the return on investment was very short. It made sense to, replace the old presses.
So y'all have how many employees now?
Probably
Right.
around 350.
Right now, about 350, maybe a little bit less.
Are you at the point that you want to be, or are you going to grow? Even more?
We're growing. We anticipated on having more than that, and we look probably by the end of summer into the fall, we'll be more at our peak.
So, are you looking for talent?
We're always looking for talent. Are you
So
looking
if-
for a job?
Well, after I retire, I'm going to sweep the floor or whatever. That's about the only talent I've got. So any of our viewers know of people or know of someone who may be interested in getting into the record business, they can contact Memphis Record Pressing.
MemphisVinyl.com.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've enjoyed it. We could have talked another hour, I know.
Yeah. Join us later for part 2.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we should do part 2. Can we do part 2? Huh?
We get a
Mark
thumbs
says
up
we
out
can
there.
do part 2. Okay, we're going to do part 2. But for now, we're going to call it quits, I guess. But let me just end by saying thank you to First South Financial for sponsoring this podcast. Without them, we would not be able to do this. And for Mark Thompson and his team, Sam and the others at V2 Media, we appreciate y'all broadcasting this, even though they tend to run a tight ship around here and won't let us keep on going. But anyway, we'll finish it. So anyway, folks, enjoyed it. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it
you.
so much. And we'll be back soon.